When working with products that are as complex as a lot of modern modelers are, and things like the Line 6 Helix, it's very easy to sometimes not be aware of some of the under hood features that are extremely valuable and that could be extremely useful. The one feature on the Helix that I would have to say for myself has been not only a huge time saver, but actually kind of a lifesaver for me, especially with the way that I work, is a feature that maybe a lot of folks aren't aware of. Now, this is going to be a feature that is not going to be as much about live guitar playing as it is about recording. So if you use your Helix to record, I think that this piece of advice is one of the most important I could give. In fact, I would say this would be my number one tip for anybody who uses their Helix to record, especially using it as an audio interface. You might ask what this is. It's the USB 7 feature. And people are going, what are you talking about, the USB 7? Well, by default, the Helix is set up, and this is something that can be tweaked in the global settings. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to stick with the default settings. The default setting on the Helix is that if in your digital audio workstation, your DAW, you add a track and set it to receive a signal from the Helix off of USB 7, that is going to give you the pure, unprocessed, direct sound of your guitar. Now, that's not a sound that anybody necessarily wants to hear. It's very lifeless, very clean, not something that we would generally use, although in musical history, there have been occasions where that tone is used. But what would be the purpose of capturing this? Well, anytime I'm recording, I always capture my process signal, and I also capture that same performance via the USB 7 or the DI'd guitar. What that allows me to do is to be able to be flexible in the future for a number of reasons. I can then reamp that in many ways. I could use something like Helix Native, or I could just physically reamp that back out of outputs in my DAW back into my processor of choice, or even if I wanted to reamp with real guitar amps, I don't have to go back and re-perform everything again. I may be super happy with the performance that I have executed, and the last thing I want to do is go re-record all of that. What if I want to change the tone of that? What if I want to try it with real amps or a different modeler, a different modeling software? Well, I don't have to do anything other than utilize this track. Now, how has this been helpful to me? Well, as people who follow my channel know, I do tons of tone demos, and oftentimes I'll even use the same piece of music to demo tones from two different types of modelers, or maybe with my real rev generator amp here. And it's such a time saver when I don't have to go re-perform everything. I just reamp it through and I get those tones immediately. Now, some folks might say, well, how do we go about doing this? Today, I am going to, utilizing Cubase Pro, but it's going to be very similar in just about any DAW you use, show you exactly how you can set your tracks up very quickly and effortlessly so that you're all set for when you're recording to always have this USB 7 ready to go. So here we are over in a blank Cubase project. Now let's say I was about to record a guitar track. Well, obviously I need to add tracks to this. I do have my Helix set up as my recording interface. That's going to be very important. So we have that set up. Now I'm going to come in here to Cubase. I can hit my little plus button at the top here. This allows me to add tracks. I want an audio track. Now, it's asking me, where would I like my audio input from? Well, I do want my processed sound. So first and foremost, what I have here is a little Helix preset based around the Brit Trim Norm amplifier model. So this is fine. I've got this little tone coming out of it. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to use that to do my recording. Well, first and foremost, I have this set in Helix to go to a multi-output. So that's going to send it out to USB 1, 2. So I'm basically going to come in here and say, I'd like to record that in stereo on inputs 1 and 2. Now, if I do this, I'm going to name this guitar. All right, so I've added my track. I'm going to record enable this, and I'm going to press record, and I'm going to record my little guitar track. I'm done. I go back to the beginning and I can listen back to my track, see how it sounds. Fine, I'm happy with it. Now, here's the problem with this. I'm now stuck with that track's tone. I mean, obviously I could pull a compressor out, or I could add an EQ or anything else to that and tweak it. But what if I just wanted to use a completely different tone, a completely different amp? I'm stuck because I've baked that sound into my track, and now I really don't have the ability to do anything else with it, unfortunately. So if I had done something else, let's do this. Let's just undo that track I recorded. I'm going to add a second track, and I'm going to come in here and say for the audio input, I'm going to choose input 7 because this is going to be equivalent to USB 7 on our Helix. Now you'll notice it says that that's mono, so this is going to be a mono track, and we always will use that as mono simply because that is a mono track. Our guitar is sending a clean, dry signal to the input of the Helix, and it is mono. There's nothing stereo about it. So we could actually change our track configuration to mono as well. And then I'm going to label this one as guitar_DI, just so I know that it's going to be different than my guitar track. Now, if I record enable both of these, I'm going to hit record. I'm actually going to mute this for a second though. I'm going to hit record and I'm going to record a similar little part again. And you'll see what happens with both of these tracks recording simultaneously. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We listen back. And that's fine. Now you will notice something, especially if I expand these out, that this here is very different looking. Obviously it's mono, but this looks much more compressed in the waveform. There's good reason for that. Let's mute our main guitar track, come back over to our guitar DI and listen to what we have. We have this boring, clean, anemic, direct guitar tone. Pretty much useless for most things except for reamping. So a lot of folks might ask and say, well, what can we do with that? Well, let's say that we're listening back, let's say in a mix, or we've delivered our track to a producer, an engineer, or to our band, or whoever's mixing our record, any million possible scenarios, and they hear this. And they go, you know, you nailed the performance. It's wonderful, but we don't like the tone. We would have rather not had that Marshall style tone. Maybe we wanted some different style tone. So there's a number of things we can do now. We can simply mute this track. One easy way for people who are using software modelers is we could put just about any other type of modeler on this track, on this DI track. I could come in here and I could say, I want to use Helix Native. So I search and call up an instance of Helix Native, and here we go. We have our choices now. So I could come in to Helix Native and I could choose something here and say, well, let's see what we can do here. Let's add an amp and a cab, and instead of going with that Marshall amp, we're going to go with the Placator Dirty, which again, kind of a hot-rodded Marshall type of a thing going on. And for the cab, I am just going to choose one of my favorite cabs. If I can actually find it, let's enlarge this out a little bit. The Greenback 25 with 121 ribbon mic. And let's say that we have this. I'm going to turn the C45 off. Now, as I play back this track here, you're going to notice that it's going to be, the DI track is going to be processed by this instance of Helix Native. And as it's playing, I could simply just come in here and say, tweak my sound however I want. What does it sound like if I crank the master up? What does it sound like if I bring the drive back? And you know, you could do something as simple as looping this so that it just keeps going, you know, after the fact. I could even shorten this loop up a little bit. and I could play around with this. I could try different modelers if I so desired. You know, I could come in here and try something like the new ToneX plugin from the fine folks over at IK Multimedia. I could choose one of my captures here that... You know, we can really do whatever we want. I'll apply my, that had a different speaker cab on it. I can apply mine onto there. Now, we can do that, but a lot of folks might say, well, I don't actually have any software modelers. I only have my Helix. Well, another very interesting thing we can do is we can actually reamp this track through a hardware Helix unit, very simply. So what we would want to do is we'd want to come back to our Helix, and we would want to come to the start here and choose USB 3.4. And you're going to see why in a second. So we want this input to be different. We don't want it to be our guitar anymore. Minimize that. I can come back into my DAW, pull up my audio connections, and I could say, well, for my output here, I want to add a new output. And I'm going to send a mono output and connect that, comes up by default, to output 3. And I have to make one more assignment here. I have to open up our guitar DI track. I have to come over here and assign the output of this track to the new mono out that I've just created. Now what we're going to have is when I press record, we are going to have this guitar DI fed out into that USB 3. It's going to come into this path on our Helix into USB 3, processed by this chain here, back out to USB 1.2, which is that this track is assigned to. And when I press record, this will be processed through the Helix and recorded onto this track. Now, obviously, I just recorded it through the same Helix preset. We would obviously want to change that or reamp that back through anything else, real tube amps if we so desire. We can then mute this track, come back over here, and listen to our reamped track. So again, very simply done. We have to route this track, depending on what DAW you're using, we have to route this out to a particular output, have that input assigned on our Helix, then sending that to our normal track that we would normally record our Helix on in our DAW. And it's as simple as that. Now we save this project, we go away, we come back at a later date. Maybe we want to reuse the track, re-record the track. We don't like the guitar sounds. For whatever reason, we now don't have to worry about re-performing everything. We can just simply use our DI tracks to reamp, whether using software modelers, hardware modelers, real tube amps, and it can potentially be a true time saver in creating great guitar productions. All right, what did you guys think of that? It's a feature that has always been in the Helix. A lot of folks are well aware of it. A lot of folks use it to a large degree, as do I. But there are a lot of folks who were unaware that that feature is there. And I think it is something that could really change the way we use our Helix if it is a feature that would potentially improve our workflow if we work in this manner. So I just wanted to do a video very detailed about this topic, and I hope it is helpful for a lot of folks. Thank you guys so much for sharing your time with me. Please like the video and also share it with anybody who you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. And also please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I thank you so much again for sharing your time with me, and I'll be back really soon with some more. Ciao for now.